Good morning, everyone. I think it's 9:30. We've got quorum, so we'll get started. Please check the city website for additional meeting detail information. Meetings can be viewed via live streaming on YouTube and the city website. The City of London is situated on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Lupiniwak, and the Adawandran. We honor and respect the history, languages, and culture of the diverse Indigenous people who call this territory home. The City of London is currently home to many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit today. As representatives of the people of the City of London, we are grateful to have the opportunity to work and live in this territory. Moving on to the City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for meetings upon request. To make a request specific to this meeting, please contact cwc@london.ca or 519-661-2489, extension 2425. So we'll move along to disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see none. We'll move on to the consent items. There are a number of consent items. I'm going to ask committee members if there are any that they would like pulled. Councillor Ferreira.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to pull the Renew London item. That's 2.4. That's 2.4.
So that will be moved to the end of the agenda then. Any other items to be pulled? See none. So moving on, there's a number of consent items. I'm going to go through them one at a time. So any questions on 2.1? I see none. Maybe the better way will be then to put all the consent items with the exception of 2.4 on the floor. Councillor Frank and Councillor Preble moving the motion, and a seconder. We'll put all the consent items, and then I will go to the committee and ask for any questions. So moving through the agenda, I'll go to anyone who has questions. Councillor Trousseau.
I would like to just ask a couple of procedural questions about amendments to the traffic and parking bylaw. It's under 2.10 and 2.11. I don't have a motion to change this, but my understanding from reading these two items and also reading the bylaw is that changes to the bylaw for things like adding a stop sign, adding a yield sign, prohibiting left turns, prohibiting right turns on red, are things that all would require what would be a minor amendment to the bylaw, and they would have to be put forward through this committee in order to be implemented. Is that correct?
Just before I go to staff, I just want to make sure these are just questions. If you want to make motions or have items.
Just a question.
Okay, question to staff then.
Yeah, through the chair, the process to amend the traffic and parking bylaw was changed in 2021 as per council direction to facilitate a quicker customer service interaction for minor items. So obvious one that comes to mind is changes to on-street parking limits within residential neighborhoods. It's really council delegated the ability for administration to make those minor changes. Items such as speed limits and the types of items that are included in item 2.10, those are items that need to continue to get council approval, and hence that's why we have a periodic amendment report to council to approve those.
Councillor?
I get a lot of requests, as you know, from my ward more particularly a particular part of my ward, for all sorts of traffic items. So since a bylaw is required, is there any reason why a counselor could not at a meeting say, I'd like to bring a proposed bylaw forward to install a no turn on red sign at this particular intersection?
I'll go to staff on that one.
Yeah, certainly, requests like that, staff are available, and the historical and preferred process is that technical changes to roadway operations get assessed first, and just to ensure conformance with Ontario traffic manuals and policies. And staff is available to assess those requests and liaise with residents as appropriate, and make the necessary bylaw amendments, whether they be administrative or via council approval.
My direct question, though, was whether councilors could bring forward proposed amendments, which of course would have to be reviewed by staff. But there's nothing precluding that, is there?
Madam Chair, there is nothing precluding councilors from bringing motions to change traffic controls, whether those controls are ones that are currently under the purview of committee and council or ones that have been delegated to staff. We would, of course, advise, as Mr. McCrae said, that we have time to review that and provide the committee with the advice of the impacts of making those changes.
In my view, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, if it's put on the agenda by a counselor, and of course, if it passes, then it would go to council, staff would have to look at it. But once it's put on the agenda, members of the public would then be able to send in added communications which would be on the agenda. Because as things stand now, members of the public have reported difficulty having things put on added agendas if it's not on the agenda.
I'll go to staff.
Madam Chair, I don't like to clerk for clerks, but the short answer is yes, anything on the agenda would be subject to correspondence from the public prior to the deadline for the publication of the committee agenda.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
And if I may, Councillor, just as a follow-up, I do have a question back to staff. I know with a lot of these amendments, surveys and petitions are required. So would that have to be done first before a member of council would come with a recommendation?
Yeah, Madam Chair, there are processes associated with some changes. In particular, I think you're probably referring to changes to on-street parking in residential neighborhoods. That is most often a neighborhood-driven initiative. So a survey is typically sent out to the residents to get the community consensus. But that is, if council chose to override and make a bylaw amendment, that would still be at the council's purview.
Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Trousseau? I'll go to our visiting Councillor Pelosa. Welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for welcoming me and recognizing me at your committee. Just here to speak briefly as the ward councillor in regards to item 2.3, being the W12A Landfill Community Mitigation Fund for the Glamorous Tennis Courts, was at this meeting as I have been attending the public liaison committee meetings since becoming elected to council in 2018. Glad that they came to a consensus for this wonderful project that would help enhance their area of the city. As you would see in the report, anything over $15,000 in expenses need to come to council for your approval. So looking for your full support here and at council for this, as they have adequate money to cover it, and this would allow for surface coat of the tennis courts right to the runout lines. They are looking forward to your support and seeing this facility upgraded and enhanced for not only their own enjoyment, but all city facilities are open to all Londoners, so something to enhance the offerings for park and recreation. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, and thank you for your comments. I'll go to Councillor Ferreira.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to speak to some of the consent items because a lot of them are touching within the ward. For 2.7 for the West Lions work, I've been following that pretty closely and I did appreciate the information in the report there. 2.8 Cavendish work, I know there's a lot of individuals who live along that area who are interested, so I'm appreciative of that and I'll be sharing that report with them too. And the parking at Eagle Heights, that was a big one, just moving the parking to the other side of the street there, just because of with the buses offloading, we don't want kids running across the street, so that was a big one. I really appreciate that. And I just wanted to say thank you for the great report. This one was very, very informative, so much appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor. As always, lots of projects happening in the downtown area. Moving on to Councillor Pribble. Just a reminder, 2.4 has been pulled. You can speak to that later on, but please proceed.
Thank you. And through the chair to the staff, first of all, I would just like to add on Councillor Palazas. I'm really happy to see both 2.2 and 2.3 on the agenda, and especially 2.2 as well, because I do think that that's very much needed with our progress of our city, and certainly will be greatly appreciated by all the residents that they see that we are moving forward in this perspective. So thank you for that. My first questions have to do with 2.5, and that's the Victoria Bridge. And Victoria Bridge is covered in two sections. It's also in the update 2023 renew. And I wanted to have clear understanding of in 2.5, we are being asked to approve the additional 225,000. And then if I go to the appendix, source of financing for the bridge's major upgrade, it's 9.5 million approved budget. And then in the renew 2023, the contract is $22.8 million. So I just want to know kind of, if we are looking at $22.8 million and approved budget is 9.5, where is the rest kind of going to come from? Or if someone can explain me the financing of this one, please.
Ms. Dan, I'll go to you. There are a number of numbers that have been mentioned, but I'll leave it with you.
Yes, through the chair, 22.8 million is the tender value for the contract. The value that you're seeing in the source of financing report for item 2.5 is this year's budget. So that's not the total life to date of that account. That is just what's in the current 2024 budget, which we're using to fund the contract increase. So that's where you're seeing a difference between those two numbers. The 22.8 was the tendered value of the construction work for the Victoria Bridge project.
Okay, thank you for that. So as this is planned to be finished this year, so I would imagine the 22.8 minus 9.5 was budgeted for last year then.
Yes, through the chair, this is a multi-year project. It was tendered in 2022 and has been working through, and so that's why you don't see all of the budget in this current budget year.
Councillor?
Okay, thank you for that. 2.6, and that has to do with the water main cleaning that we are going to be doing 3.9 kilometers. And by the way, thank you. It is in my ward, so I'm very happy certainly to see that. I just want to ask you, we are looking now into a second year of this project, and potentially this is going to be awarded 2 to 5 years. The first year, was it done by the same company as currently will be doing it the second year?
Through the chair, thank you. Yes, it is. It was a multi-year contract, so this is awarding the second year of the contract to the same contractor.
Councillor?
Thank you. And out of curiosity, through the chair, always through the chair, to the staff. And the year, out of my curiosity and our kind of thinking and strategy, we didn't do it last year. We did only 1 year, not with the option because of multi-year budget, or was there different thinking that we did 1 year and now we are doing 2, potentially 5 years with options? Is there any reasoning behind that?
Thank you. Through the chair, generally when we do a multi-year contract such as this, it's so that we can ensure performance on the contractor basis, so that if the contractor does not perform well, we run into issues with a year of a contract. We don't necessarily have to extend it the following year. We have that option. So it leaves it a little bit more flexible for staff. However, it does also give us the opportunity to carry prices forward and have certainty on future years' prices if the contractor's performance is good.
Thank you for that. And regarding this, I think I have the last question. And Hastings is one of the streets on this map, and we did an extensive renovation, which we just finished. And when we do this cleaning, this initiative, how disruptive is it both to the traffic and to the residents? Because we just finished a big project there.
Thank you. Through the chair. So one of the reasons we do the cleaning and lining program is because the disruption is significantly less than if we were to replace the water main, and the cost is significantly less. So properties that are serviced by the water main that is being cleaned and lined will be put on temporary water, so there's no disruption or only very, very short disruption as they're being switched between the two systems. And it's a fairly short duration. So much, much less disruptive than, say, a full street reconstruction that would be required if we were replacing the water main.
If any digging is required on the hindsight, or would it be possible if we have such projects that we time it so it's done before the entire construction is completed?
Thank you. So through the chair, sometimes that's possible, but typically it's a very different type of contractor that's doing that work. So oftentimes it is done separately so that we don't run into health and safety issues by having two different contractors on the site at the same time.
Counselor?
Through this cleaning and this initiative, are we going to be digging there on that road?
So through the chair, this is what we refer to as a trenchless technology, actually. So very, very minimal excavation. Oftentimes there may be what we call a hydro-ex, and so a very small excavation just to expose a part of the water main, but very, very minimal.
Counselor?
Okay, thank you for that. 2.7 and 2.7 has to do with the infrastructure renewal. I have a question on this one, and I just want to make sure that our recommendation of approval is going with the financing. And the reason why I'm asking is, if we look at page 63 in A1, we are asked to approve $358,000. And I do understand that in this one, there is no engineering, it just says admin and residential inspection. But if I go to page 65, it does say $294,000 for the design and $358,000 resident inspection. And I could have missed it in the report, but I just don't see anywhere where is the $294,000 covered in what we are approving. That's, yes, if you can please answer that one to me.
So I'll just explain. I guess in our recommendation, AI, we have two amounts, I and II, 358,606 approximately. And you are referring
No.
these figures to the summary on page 65. I just want to get clarification to staff.
Through the chair to the staff. So actually, that was my next one. I didn't want to kind of confuse it with a lot of numbers. So in I, it's 358, and on page 65, when it's the summary of the project assignments, the detailed design 294, I just don't see that we are approving it. If we go to II, number 2, it says, in this paragraph, it does say all three areas. What I mean by that is the inspection, the contract, and also the design. But it's 606,032 to 606,000. But if I go on the summary of the project, it's estimated at 891,000. So both of them, if you can just explain to me, because the way, unless I missed it, we are approving lower amounts that are actually required.
Yeah, if we can get clarification, and please proceed.
Sure, thank you. Through the chair. So what you're seeing in table 1 is a breakdown of previously awarded design fees. So that's that $294,000 and the $442,000. So those fees were awarded, would have been awarded in 2023, I believe. So through a previous year's budget, because the detailed design work is done previously. This report is to award the resident inspection and contract administration fees, so that 358 and the 449. So that's coming out of this year's budget. So we've shown both so that we have a total project fee for transparency and the total amounts awarded to the contractor, or actually, sorry, in this case, to the consultants over the lifespan of the project.
And what about II? The amount of $606,032.90.
Oh, sorry. Nope, I got it. Sorry, thank you, through the chair. Yeah, so there's also a design fee increase that is included in that.
And does that amount relate at all to the summary of project assignments on page 65? If I've got that right, Counselor? Yes.
I now do understand the explanation in terms of the design. Previous years they hit that, and I do understand that now. So my questions have been answered on that one. Thank you.
Thank you.
2.9, which has to do with the renewal program of the separation phase 4. And I just want to make sure that this area sooner or later will have, I do believe that there's going to be huge developments across RBC. Now London Free Press building goes down, then City Plaza is going to have huge developments as well sooner or later. And I do understand with the separation, it's going to ease it up, no doubt. But on the other hand, are we really kind of considering, in terms of the source, in terms of the infrastructure, all this area, because it might be really hugely developed? So are we thinking about it, and are we, this is a big project, both financially and time-wise, will it truly satisfy our needs, not in 1, 10, 20, 30 years? And I'm quite sure we thought about it, but I just want to know your thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, and through to the chair. Yes, so the short answer is yes, absolutely. So this is a sewer separation project, so by that means we're already freeing up sanitary capacity by removing that sanitary flow, or the stormwater flow rather, from the sanitary sewer. But in addition to that, we are also increasing the size of the sanitary sewer, recognizing that we want to support and facilitate intensification in the downtown. So we are setting this sewer up to be able to take a lot more housing units, business, and so on in the downtown area.
Counselor?
Thank you very much for that answer. 2.10, and there's a very kind of a simple one. There's, by the way, thank you. There were a lot of, I'll tell you right now, I did find in this report a lot of requests from my residents that they did ask for certain changes, and they have been addressed, so thank you very much for that. I will soon talk more about the Canvasway parking, but I'm not going to delay today. Just a quick question on the Dundas between Rideout and Wellington. We are taking it down from 30 to 20 kilometers an hour. The 20 kilometers is really, and I know this location quite well, and I certainly don't want anyone to speed there. But on the other hand, from 30 to 20, was there a certain study there, or what is the recommendation to go this low? Thank you.
Relating to the speed limit on Dundas?
Yeah, this recommendation is being made in conjunction with other initiatives and an ongoing operational review of Dundas Place. And as part of how administration are working with the downtown BIA and the Dundas Place business owners on how best to help get Dundas Place to success in that it's a flex street. It's a unique street, and that's intended to be an event gathering space. So we know we need to support those kind of gathering activities, and we also need to support the businesses. Included in this bylaw are a right turn restriction removal, and that was out of feedback from a business interest in that they wanted, they were flagging that access to businesses on Dundas Place could be made easier by that. So we're certainly intending to support the businesses on Dundas Place. The recommendation with respect to the speed limit reduction is recognizing all that it's a very unique street. There is a lot going on, both respect to, like with all modes of travel, walking, cycling, motor vehicles, and like parking and business access, as well as the business interaction, like patios, for example. And so that is the rationale for the recommendation of the lower speed limit.
Counselor?
Okay, thank you for that rationale behind it. I'm just saying because 20 is really slow, but what you are saying certainly does make sense. And as I said, I'm familiar with it and for the patios, and there are quite a few of them, and bicyclists as well. So thank you for the answer and thank you for the rationale behind it. Last one, I have 2.12. And I just want to make sure, we have again 3 bids that we went out with and that we are asked to accept. And I just want to make sure I understand. There are 3 maps attached. The 3 items, the 3 organizations, or actually 2 organizations, but 3 initiatives that we are going to be approving, does it cover all these 3 maps, these 3 initiatives, or not? And I just want to know if this was a full project or if there's going to be additional money budget bids coming forward. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Dan?
Yes, and through the chair, these awards are for vendors of record for the shelter amenities. So there was 3 proposals that went through an RFP. This is to provide our benching and leaning benches, the lighting, and then the obelisk feature, which is going to be the visual identifier for every RT stop. And so the reason the maps show the full corridors for all of our 3 approved RT corridors is this will be the vendor of record that will be hard spec'd into our future contracts. The general contractor will do the work and then coordinate with these vendors to be able to install the infrastructure that we've pre-purchased. So the budget has been incorporated into the overall project for the entire program.
Counselor?
Okay, thank you for that. And I actually have a meeting tomorrow about BRT, and I have a couple of more questions about it. But for now, thank you very much for the answers. And I don't have no more questions. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
And thank you, staff.
I'll go to any other members that have questions on the consent items that are before us. If the committee will allow me, I just have one follow-up question to one of the items, which is 2.5, and this is the Victoria Bridge financing. I know we are increasing the amount, and I have a question to staff on reasons why the amount has been increased and when can we expect this bridge to open?
Yes, and through the chair, as I mentioned earlier, this was a 2022 project. Our original timeline under our contract for completion was to have completed before the end of last year. However, the very beginning of the project, we did have some challenges related to our sensitive in-water work, also supply chain related to the structural steel. And so that did set off the start of the contract a little bit later. What we did last year was really try to push to beat the weather and get our top coat asphalt down on the bridge. Unfortunately, the asphalt plants closed before that could happen. And so now it's extended the project into this year. We've been working through the winter and we'll be ready to reopen. As soon as those asphalt plants open, we'll be first in line to be able to get asphalt on the deck of the bridge. And then looking to open up by summer of this year, we should have traffic back on the bridge. And then we've got some finishing work to do to put the park back together down around and finish off the TVP connection. So we're really looking forward to welcoming traffic back to that project. Due to the extension of the time, what we have forward today is an increase into the contract administration assignment with our consultants. So they literally are on the job for longer than originally intended, and we need to extend that contract.
Thank you for that. And we do have the consent items as listed. We have a mover and a seconder. If we can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to the consent item that we pulled, 2.4, or is that after scheduled or items for direction? I'm just going to ask that question of clerks. Okay, so we usually do it at the end of the agenda. So we will proceed to scheduled items. And I understand we do have the chair. We do not have to ask for delegation status if only the chair is speaking. I see Mr. Khan is here with us. Mr. Khan, you have, thank you for joining us here. You have up to 5 minutes. Welcome.
Thank you. Madam Chair and CWC members.
Mr. Khan, if you can get that mic a little bit closer
Okay.
so we can hear you.
Yeah. Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, just lean a little bit more into it
Okay.
if it's not too uncomfortable.
I will try. Chair, Madam Chair and CWC members, thank you very much for your time today. Keeping in view the limited time available for this presentation, I will try to be precise, to the point, and be very brief. Before I start, let me introduce my team. We have Mr. Trevor Kerr. He is the Vice Chair of ITCAC and also Chair of Subcommittee for the Transit and the Environment. And then Mr. Vincent Lobrano. He is the Chair for the Active Transportation Committee. And then Mr. Ralph Bochal. He is the Chair for the MMP, Mobility Master Plan. And Mr. Antonio Santiago. He is the Chair for the Vision Zero and the Road Safety. Brief intros of our all chairs and the vice chairs are mentioned in the report, so I don't need to go through them. And thank you very much, gentlemen, for your time and commitment for today's presentation. During the term 2022-2023, ITCAC held 17 meetings, received 34 presentations from staff and consultants, and discussed 37 public notices and planning applications. Our meetings were always full of discussions and deliberations. We never faced any quorum issue. I hope CWC members have already scanned our report. The report reflects the style and the culture of our working at the committee. It also shows the firm commitment from the members of ITCAC towards betterment of the city we all call home. Madam Chair and CWC members, the role of a Community Advisory Committee is to provide Municipal Council with a formalized, ongoing opportunity for public consultation and to offer recommendations, advice, and information on those specialized matters which relate to purpose of this committee. ITCAC is a group of retired and active professionals who come from different professions and backgrounds, bring diverse experience, exposure, and expertise from their respective fields. Based upon our experience at the committee during the past term, we have drafted 4 recommendations for yours and Council's consideration. To save time, I will not read those recommendations here. Rather, I will try to explain very briefly one by one. Recommendation 1 is a solution of time boxing. You might have heard from all advisory committees time to time, and they have always highlighted. Recommendation 2 is basically to enhance the relationship and the communication among community advisory committees. Technically, it is an extension of the recommendation 1. Recommendation 3 is about annual report and work plans of each community advisory committee. For sure, it will render every community advisory committee more responsive, focused, and productive. Recommendation 4 is about non-voting members from the boards and the commissions. It was the practice in past. It will save not only ITCAC's time, but also indirectly the councils as well, which is otherwise consumed in inter-agencies communication whenever requested by the advisory committees.
Mr. Khan, you have about 30 seconds left.
Yes, thank you. Once again, thank you for this wonderful opportunity. Me and my colleagues would be happy to respond to your any questions, concerns, and observations. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Khan. And thank you to the members for joining you as well. I'd like to go to the committee. Any comments? Receiving the delegation and the recommendations. Councillor Purble?
I actually don't have a questions because I actually attended the meeting, but I just want to say to all the members and even ones that are not here, thank you very much for the work and for your input because we do value it. It's, as I said this last meeting, I said, it's not that I will always agree with everything that comes from this subcommittee or this advisory committee, but I really like to hear your opinions and there's very valuable feedback. Thank you.
Councillor Frank?
Thank you. Yes, I also want to echo those comments. I appreciate the input that you guys are sharing and the time that you're spending on a lot of the important files we have coming to us. I'm wondering through the chair if it's appropriate to have the 3 recommendations referred to the clerks for review, since they mostly, in my opinion, relate to some of those procedures, and then have them report back on how some of these recommendations can be incorporated.
So these are the 4 recommendations going to clerks for report back to us on how they could be implemented?
Yeah, it's my understanding the majority of these seem to be somewhat procedural in relation to the clerk's role. And so I'm wondering, I just would like to hear their input on if they're able to incorporate some of these recommendations, because I do think a lot of them make sense. But before I make a motion to implement them, I'd like to hear from the clerks as well. So hoping maybe if, I don't know if the clerks would like to comment on that as a motion before I make a motion fully, but thought that might be appropriate.
I would suggest maybe bringing forward a motion then to refer to clerks.
Sure, yes. Then I'd like to make a motion to take the recommendations from this report and refer to the clerks for report back. A governance working group. Oh, okay, yeah. Governance working group for a report back to this committee, maybe by end of Q2 of this year.
Q2, would that be June? Okay, I'm looking for a seconder. Councillor Trousseau seconds. Any questions, comments? Councillor Purble?
Thank you, and through the chair to the staff, I just want to know if there was any feedback before we vote on it, any feedback from the staff regarding the both proposal as well as the timeline. Thank you.
Madam Chair, this work would likely be best done through clerks and the governance working group, as it is related to how the advisory committees operate themselves and how they're resourced. There may be some good best practices in these recommendations that could apply to other committees. So I don't want to put a timeline forward for clerks on when they'd be able to review that for governance working group.
Councillor?
Thank you for the answer. No more questions.
Okay. I see Deputy Mayor Lewis joining us, and you've got your hand up. Welcome, Deputy Mayor, to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, colleagues, 2 cautions on this. Some of the advisory committee items that need to be addressed are already on the governance working group agenda. We are not going to meet a Q2 report back if this is sent to governance. So I would suggest if colleagues want to refer this to governance working group, do not put a date on it. We have several items already on the agenda that quite frankly need to be dealt with in a more timely manner. So this would not be one of the top items on the agenda right now, but it is on our agenda for a review, because we do have, as colleagues will recall, we've actually extended the terms of the advisory committees for an extra period of time. So I think that if you want to refer this to governance working group, I would just ask that you please don't put a date on it, because we've got several other items ahead of it on the schedule. The other thing that I would caution is I just want colleagues to be mindful of the fact that a lot of work, and and Madam Chair, I believe you were part of that working group last term too, that we spent a lot of time developing terms of reference for the community advisory committees. And I would just caution that in follow-up to all that work, we want to be careful about creating two-tiered advisory committees. Advisory committees where some have more range and resources and a broader term of reference than others. So just something for people to think about. But the main thing for me is if you're going to refer this to governance working group, please do not put a timeline on the report back.
Deputy Mayor, thank you for reminding me in particular that the advisory groups are going to be reviewed, and I'm not exactly sure if we know what those timelines will be. So it would make sense if this, that we would not put a timeline on because it can be reviewed through that process. I wonder if I can ask clerks if we have a general idea when the advisory groups will be reviewed. Is that, do we know where we are with that? I guess there's no one here to respond to that. So I would be very cautious as well. Putting a timeline can create a bit of a conflict, and having been part of a working group that has reviewed advisory groups, it is a very long process as well. Councillor Frank.
Thank you. Yes. No, I'm happy to remove the timeline, although I would like to see this probably done in the next year or so, because I also think it's a priority for a governance working group. But I'm happy to withdraw the timeline on it and have this. I still would like this to go to governance working group because I do think there are some recommendations that are slightly different than the ones that we have in the package already for governance working group. So again, I'd like to make a motion maybe to refer these recommendations to governance working group for review and consideration. And then we can decide how they mesh with our existing direction for reviewing advisory committees.
If I may, Councillor, just to get clarification, that it would also be reviewed through the advisory group's review as well. Or are you asking it to be separate to that review? I think we need to really understand if we are going to have, and I just want to follow up with the Deputy Mayor's comments about having a two-tier system. So all advisory groups should be reviewed as one. These recommendations could go to that process, just for clarification.
Yes, yeah, I'm fine with that. I think I would have to pull up the governance working group deferred matters list, but I'm imagining there is an item that says review advisory committees, and I would suggest that these be just looked at the same time as our general review of advisory committees. But I do want these recommendations to make their way to governance working group for us to look at.
Perfect. Councillor Trousseau.
I don't share the concern that there's going to be a two-tier system of committees because we received, based on their workload and based on a lot of thought, a specific recommendation. And other committees, other advisory committees are free to do that. And if this means that we're going to be using a slightly modified procedure for this committee, then so be it. And other committees, I would really suggest that other committees take a look at this report to get an idea of a really good template. We received another really excellent report at another committee recently. So I want to encourage this. And if the workload of governance is just so onerous that we can't deal with it in a timely way, could this go to SPPC instead of governance?
I know the governance working group usually reports to SPPC, and that report would be addressed at SPPC. I'll go to the Deputy Mayor as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just, I want to follow up on a couple of things because I think it's important to recognize colleagues should really review the work that the prior governance working group did in reviewing these. Some of the recommendations with respect to this report were actually removed in the last set of work that the governance working group did. So, for example, the recommendation that the advisory committees should be creating and approving their own work plan and submitting a progress report, that was altered by the last review of advisory committees. So what we actually have here in this recommendation in particular is an advisory committee asking to go back to a former structure. We've got another recommendation that the committee that we ask or direct senior level representatives from organizations like the London Airport, the LEDC, CAA, which we can ask, but we have no authority to direct. So I really think rather than trying to move this forward and start passing some recommendations through SPPC, it really does need to go to governance working group. And that will be an opportunity to review the work that was done by last term's working group and reviewing the CA terms of reference as well, because it was 3.5 years of work to get to the terms of reference we have today. So now to start pulling those apart and saying, well, we're going to go back on this one based on the recommendation of one committee, I think it would really be getting the cart ahead of the horse. So we do have that referral already for a review at governance working group. As colleagues will know, March 2025 is the expiry of the current term for the advisory committees. So we will be dealing with this at governance working group sometime in 2024 because we have to take any steps necessary with regard to any changes before the next round of appointments to these advisory committees happen. So for colleagues, I guess, comfort or surety, it will be dealt with by governance working group this year because we do have a timeline to make some decisions prior to the expiry of their term in March of 2025.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And just for committee's information, the governance working group is meeting next week, and there will be a a report on advisory groups at that meeting. I'll go to Councillor Frank, and then Councillor Trousseau, I'll follow. Oh, do you want me to go back to you?
No, I'm ready to vote. I'm ready to vote on her motion.
Okay, if you can just turn off your mic.
I'm ready to vote on her motion.
And I'll go to Councillor Frank.
I'm ready to vote as well, actually. Thanks.
If we can have the motion up. There are no further questions, comments? I don't have it. Refresh your screen. I just did. It's not letting me do it. So we have a motion in front of us that the third report of the Integrated Transportation Community Advisory Committee, ITCAC, from the meeting held on February 21st, 2024 be received. The 4 recommendations within the report be forwarded to the Governance Working Group for review and consideration. It being noted that a verbal delegation from Mr. Khan, Chair of ITCAC, with respect to this matter was received. That is the motion. Any further questions? Councillor Trousseau.
If this motion exhausts the item and then we move on to something else, I do have one other question. So maybe I should ask that before we vote on this. Yes.
If it refers to this item?
Yeah. Somewhere in your report, you mentioned that you also review selected planning applications that have a bearing on transportation issues. And my question is, how is it determined, the source, how is it determined which planning applications you actually look at? Is that referred from planning staff because they've made a determination that there are traffic issues, or do you self-select them, if I may ask?
So this is a question to staff?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer that. The determination is made by staff in planning and economic development based on the general trip generation, as well as sometimes the level of public interest or the degree of change that's anticipated.
Counselor?
Well, okay, so this is very timely then, because I have a number of applications in my ward. I'm not going to get into a particular application here, but it might be that on the face of application 1, there's nothing that would warrant this to go to the committee. And on the face of application 2, there's nothing that would warrant on the face of it going to this committee. But when you put together application 1, 2, 3, and 4, now there's another one. I'm talking about the Oxford corridor, by the way. It might not be a bad idea for them to be looking at it. So is there a way that a ward councillor can try to encourage planning staff to forward a group of related applications to this committee for their review? Because I think and it's really timely. It has to happen quickly, because once an application is filed, the planning staff is on a very, very short turnaround period. So we need to figure out a way to bring in the expertise of this committee in a useful way.
Madam Chair, I'm not sure what mechanism there is for councillors to refer things to the advisory committees, except by motion, I suspect, at the relevant committee. So whether that would be PEC or here, I'm not positive. That's getting into a bit of a governance piece that's not necessarily something I'm expert in. I would suggest that most major projects, as well as all EAs and corridors, do end up at ITCAC. The ones that are less likely to do so are things where there's a non-incremental change project to project. So you may be seeing the repurposing of a school site into housing. The trip generation's approximately the same. A lot of those do still end up going, though, because of the community interest. Mr. McCrae, do you know anything additional around how the development applications are chosen for ITCAC?
Ms. Chair is correct in that it's at the discretion of the planning and economic development staff, and I think pretty sure they are guided by the committee terms of reference. So it lists the number of matters that the committee shall entertain, and it's one bullet is significant land use plans that affect transportation matters, area planning studies, secondary plans, official plan reviews, so that staff review the terms of reference of the committee.
Counselor?
Yes, so well, I understand a counselor can't unilaterally on the counselor's own desire add an item, but I've had conversations with Mr. McCrae and other members of planning staff about the abundance of related applications along the Oxford corridor. Now there's one on at Wonderland and Beaverbrook. May I ask, is that something that has been referred? Have those been referred to this committee? And I'm talking about the huge development in between Cherry Hill and Beaverbrook. I'm talking about other ones in that immediate vicinity. Are you looking at those?
Counselor, I think that could be a question that you can follow up with staff. I'm not sure if they have that information, but I'll leave it up to staff.
Madam Chair, I can't off the top of my head, nor can Mr. McCrae, recall what has gone to this committee from planning exactly, or what might be on future upcoming agendas. We certainly can work with our colleagues in planning and get a list of past submissions that have been provided and anything that is pending.
And the counselor is able to reach out to staff, to yourself, or to planning. I guess that's where the clarification needs to be made a little bit more. What do we know is coming up at different committees regarding different projects?
Madam Chair, I'm happy to let Ms. McNeely know that there's interest in these projects and whether they're going to ITCAC, and we can follow up directly with the counselor as to the intent from planning, and that would give the counselor the ability to make decisions relative to whether he would like to see something different occur.
Thank you for that. Are you satisfied, counselor? That was a silly
As much as I'm going to be today.
From the chair. Thank you for your questions, though. We do have a motion. Any further questions? We can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to 3.2, we have another delegation request from the Chair of the Environment Stewardship and Action Community Advisory Committee, Mr. Samuels. Welcome to Civic, and you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Please
Good
proceed.
morning. Always nice to be back at Civic Works. I'm here to present the report from our committee. There's a few items on it that I thought might be worthwhile to explain in conversation, just in case there are any questions about them. Before I get to that report, though, I just wanted to mention that aspects of what was just talked about in the previous item resonate with me as someone who served on advisory committees for the last several years. Sometimes we get into confusing situations about intergroup communication, where we're not clear on whether an item belongs within the scope of one committee or the next, or sometimes both. And there can be delays when things have to be referred back and forth. In fact, one of the items I'll talk about from our report today originally started at a different committee, which then had to be referred back to our committee. And so a bit of preemptive understanding, I think, would go a long way, especially if items can be circulated between multiple committees as needed. So on our report in your agenda, you'll see there's a few items there. Briefly, I'm just going to describe them and happy to take any questions you might have. Our Climate Emergency Action Plan Working Group is set to schedule a meeting with communications staff to figure out how our committee can support developing more robust and far-reaching communications to help access parts of the London community that need certain types of messaging about climate change mitigation and adaptation. One item that we voted on at our committee meeting was to use a portion of our committee's annual budget, $1,000, to print yard signs. You'll see an attachment with the report. It's a version of this. This is what's used currently by Stormwater. It's got the mascot filter fill on it. I have one of these on my front lawn. I get a lot of compliments on it. I think it's great. We want to keep the look of a sign similar and create one that's suitable for people that are looking to naturalize their yards. Recognizing recent work that was done on the yard and lot maintenance bylaw, there will still be conflicts between neighbors in the community, and putting up an information sign is a really good way of indicating that a naturalization project is intentional, and that can reduce demand on municipal compliance receiving complaints where it's very clear this yard is being naturalized, here's where you can access more information about the bylaw, etc. And item 5.2, we had a communication with staff about potentially arranging for someone to be on site at EarthFest, which is coming up next month, just in case there are questions from community about the new yard and lot maintenance bylaw. Lots of interest in naturalization projects nowadays, and so it's really helpful for them to be able to ask those questions of knowledgeable staff. And item 5.3, this is related to the tree protection bylaw. Our committee received something that was referred from the Ecological Community Advisory Committee about tree removals. And in particular, we had some questions about the enforcement process where we suspect that illegal tree removals have occurred. We learned from staff that there's kind of two pieces to enforcement. One is for smaller scale tree removals, like individual trees, where they could be administered a monetary penalty. The other is for larger scale tree removals of multiple trees, which can actually be pursued under the Provincial Offences Act. What we learned through that discussion, though, is it is a requirement under that legislation that complaints need to be submitted within 6 months of the infraction. And why that was concerning for us is we were looking at mapping data that was older than 6 months, meaning that if trees are removed and the mapping, aerial photography of trees is not being updated regularly enough, then there's a chance we'll exceed that allowable 6-month period, and then it's very difficult to take enforcement action. And so what our committee is recommending, which you'll see in the report, is to take a look at this bylaw and opportunities to improve enforcement, particularly increasing the frequency of aerial mapping should be feasible. We heard from staff that the cost of carrying out those mapping exercises is not very expensive and could be quite reasonable. So just looking to your committee for more information about that. And then finally, we have a few items coming up on our next meeting agenda, just as a preview for you. These were additional to our work plan that we submitted last month. Just for your awareness, the committee has expressed interest in the neighborhood decision-making program and how climate change is being factored into the criteria and projects supported by that program. And so that's all I have. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Samuels, and thank you to your committee as well for the work that you do. We do have the fourth report in front of us. There is a request, 5.3, regarding the tree protection bylaw. Oh. My apologies. I just can't turn it off.
Your time's up.
I just wanted to go to staff that 5.3, the tree protection bylaw, that this matter be included in the Civic Works deferred list. Is that a concern if the committee decides to do this?
Madam Chair, we'd be pleased to report back.
Any questions from the committee? Councillor Trousseau.
I just want to point out that I want to comment through the chair that I'm very happy that you're looking at the tree protection bylaw. Since I've taken this seat on council, I've been getting communications from people in various stages of different kinds of projects expressing concerns about tree removal. And I think more attention needs to be given to this. And one thing that I notice is whenever there is a proposal for tree removal, whether it's with respect to an infrastructure project or whether it's with respect to a development project or whatever, there is a corresponding arborist report. And I want to make sure that the arborist report, which actually gets down to the level of the trees and identifies why they have to be removed, which I found very useful. I want to make sure that that's included in the Get Involved page at the earliest stage, because I've had situations where people have reported to me that there are going to be tree removals, but we can't find the documentation in back of it. And then by the time, it's put on there, it might be too late. Is there a way to ensure that the arborist report is included in all of the Get Involved type pages from the beginning so people don't have to ask for it?
Madam Chair, we certainly can work with our colleagues in communications to ensure those are posted at the earliest available date. They may be in some cases still labeled as draft, but absolutely we can work to improve the access to those reports through Get Involved.
And my only other question is, I just want to make sure that you're actually given access to the aerial mapping resources that you're asking for. I mean, I'm very impressed that you have the expertise on your committee to actually read these things and turn them into actionable evidence to make policy. Where exactly is that? You indicated that it was not going to be very expensive, but can I get some assurance that you're going to be able to access that data when you need it?
Madam Chair, I do have Mr. Yeoman, the Director of Parks and Forestry, on the line for this call, and he's had a number of discussions with the advisory committee and can speak to the more detailed points of access. Before I give up the mic, I just wanted to flag that generally matters related to trees and tree protection do go to PEC. So I'm not sure if perhaps the request that the tree protection bylaw return to Civic Works should just be amended to say to the appropriate standing committee of council. I believe we should be at PEC for that.
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the question. We did have a very good discussion about this at committee. The request actually and the suggestion came from the committee members for administration to have that information for it to be shared publicly and made available. Doing two flyovers potentially every year. We do an annual one right now. The second one would help us with our monitoring work that we do looking at canopy cover and has a number of benefits beyond just the enforcement aspect. So the costs continue to decrease with aerial photography, and there's a lot more technology we're exploring as well. So we think this will be really helpful. It'll be available to us and members of the public at large.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yeoman, for being with us. We are going to make an amendment then, following up on Ms. Scher's comments about the tree protection bylaw going to the appropriate committee, as opposed to Civic Works Deferred Matters List. Councillor Trussell.
Yeah, I just want to flag the tree protection bylaw as one of those policy issues that very well could cut across different committee jurisdictions, because if it's an infrastructure project, it's definitely not going to planning committee for a council determination. It would be more within the jurisdiction of this committee. So tree removals occur in a variety of different circumstances, and I think it's important that we have the flexibility to make sure that that we don't miss a tree protection issue because of jurisdictional issues.
Ms. Scher.
Just to clarify, Madam Chair, changes to the bylaw general report to PEC, the application of that bylaw to infrastructure projects would be in the infrastructure reports that come to this committee. So it is a bit of belt and suspenders, but generally when we've amended the tree protection bylaw, urban forestry strategy, those have gone to planning and environment as per the committee's defined role, but you would still see tree protection information associated with major infrastructure projects coming to this committee as well.
So there's an overlap. Thank you, Councillor. Any other questions from committee? Councillor Pribble.
Thank you, and through the chair to actually Mr. Samuels, and I just want to thank you and your committee, as well as ecological one with headed by Sandy Levine. I just want to let you know, and you certainly know, and you are aware, and your members as well, all the when I attend your meetings, you know that I don't agree always with everything because I look at the whole picture for 500,000 of Londoners. But one thing is, I'll take this opportunity to let you know, and Sandy Levin as well, that actually thanks to my additional information I received at your meetings, I did support one initiative in the multi-year budget. So I think that the work you do is certainly considered, not always agreed by the councillors, but certainly considered, and we certainly do take it to our hearts, and we do think about it. Thank you.
Councillor Frank.
Thank you, yes, and I want to echo Councillor Pribble's comments, and I look at everything from the city of 500,000 people as well, and I agree with almost everything you guys say. So I think we always have different perspectives on council, but love what you guys do. I just wanted to follow up and ask, with the other items, like the additional business, can I confirm that if we receive this report, then the other requested asks in the report will also happen as well?
I'll go to the clerk.
The motion that was drafted is up on the screen right now, and it pulls out any of the items within the report that had a request or an action. So if this is voted in favor, then those actions would be taken.
Perfect, thanks.
We need a mover and a seconder as well, Councillor Trussell and Councillor Ferreira. Any other questions? You can proceed to vote. Councillor Pribble? Councillor Pribble?
Thank you. I just did finish reading the entire motion. Just again, before we vote, I would say this thing, and I know staff did already address one thing, but is there anything in this motion in all the points that the staff would like to give us a feedback or comment on? Thank you.
Madam Chair, I think that the motion put forward from the advisory committee contains a number of very positive actions, and we're happy to advance them with our colleagues.
Thank you very much for your response.
No further questions? We can proceed to vote then.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Okay, moving on to the next items for direction. We do have a added revised submission 4.1 regarding the Harris Park shoreline reconstruction. We see Ms. Velastro here, who is requesting for delegation status, so I will look to the committee to approve the delegation. Councillor Ferreira? Seconded by Councillor Trousseau. You can proceed to vote.
Councillor Trousseau?
I vote yes.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Ms. Velastro, welcome to committee. You have up to 5 minutes, and we have received your added submission, so please proceed.
Thank you. I'm here to ask the committee to consider 3 aesthetic changes to the final design of the Harris Park shoreline reconstruction. These were brought forward to staff but never really seriously considered. I just want to first mention that the sloped embankment of large river stone and vegetated upper edge is a standard design for all stormwater projects except for stormwater ponds. And you can see this. You can see it at Mud Creek at Wonderland. You can see it at Gainesville Road, just west of High Park. You can see it at Pottersburg Creek. And I'm just raising this because if you're familiar with these areas, then you would understand that the criticism of this project is fair and informed because we can see from past projects of what it's going to be like going forward. So the 3 items that I'm asking you to consider is that the concrete lookout at the south end of Harris Park. There's also one currently at Ivy Park. It is a concrete circle with benches, concrete benches. It's underutilized, and it's often defaced with graffiti. The cost of the proposed outlook at Harris Park is $200,000, and it's going to have potted trees similar than what you see like on Dundas Street. We think that it's unnecessary, and that the money would be used better if it was put back into parks, ideally to purchase land to expand community parks or something to that effect. And we think that just having benches where people can sit down and enjoy the river would be just as nice than a concrete lookout that costs $200,000. So we're just asking that to be reconsidered and if the money can't be better used. Sorry, give me a second here. Also, we would appreciate if the tree plantings would better reflect a natural forest composition along the river. This would be tree species that naturally grow together combined with understory trees. Understory trees are smaller trees that grow beneath the canopy. They tend to flower in the spring and produce berries later on, and the city already plants flowering understory trees at the forks. This combination is important because birds feel safer with tiered trees as they move down to the ground. And the flowers are important to pollinators in the spring, and the berries are relished by wildlife later on in the season. It's important to people because flowering trees are beautiful, and they're also fragrant, and they make you feel like spring is here. And the overlapping canopies provide good shade. It provides dense shade, enough that it actually cools the outdoor temperature if you're underneath them. So it actually gives relief. Right now, Harris Park is a football field. It's not comfortable. It's hard to be there without some kind of shade. You may not know this, but I know this because I made this happen, is that the City of London declared itself a bee city in 2016. But it has taken little action to fulfill its obligations under this designation. So reconsidering the trees at Harris Park, would go a long way to making London a true bee city. I also want to address the cottonwoods. The cottonwoods are these are iconic trees along the Thames River, and I'm being told that they're not going to replant them. Those are the trees that they cut down along the river now. And in the environmental impact statement, it said these trees were in good condition. They're also ancient trees. They were ancient trees. They're gone now. And my understanding is that there was never an issue with these cottonwoods. The issue staff cited was that they're poplars. So they're fast-growing trees. They're mighty, mighty trees. And they're called cottonwoods because their seeds look like cotton balls that fly out through the air. There's never, as far as I know, an incident at Harris Park with these cottonwood trees. And they certainly would not pose a threat if they're planted and incorporated in a larger tree stand rather than individual trees. Since the environmental impact statement never had a chance for public review, I would
You
like...
have a few more seconds.
Okay,
Please.
we would appreciate an opportunity to submit a tree planting plan that incorporates what the city has done, but enhanced what the city has done. And we would like that done for an opportunity to have that reviewed. And then the last thing is based on, public open, that's it. Okay, is my time up?
Yes, it is. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thank you.
I'd like to go to committee. Any questions, comments? Councillor Trussell.
Yes, a number of questions. First of all, generally to staff, you've heard those three recommendations. Are those things that can be incorporated into the project at this time?
Could you be a little bit more specific, please? Oh. Are you referring to the submission or to the comments?
Yes, the speaker identified three requests that she was making. If the chair wants to let her reiterate those three succinctly, but you have them, okay.
Madam Chair, I believe I have them there. To delete the concrete lookout, to do a more naturalized tree planting with understory, including potential restoration of the cottonwoods, and to have the community design the tree planting for submission to the city. Is that correct? So I'm going to just sort of as a general statement say that we are quite a ways down the path with this project, and a number of these things, including the concrete lookout, have been the subject of a great deal of discussion in the past. When Back to the River didn't proceed with the major improvements to the forks of the Thames, some other improvements to improve public access to the waterway for all users was part of that project. And this project, the lookout, comes from that space. With respect to the tree plantings and what opportunities there are for different restoration and for community participation, I do have Mr. Yeoman on the line, and he may be able to provide some more insight there.
Mr. Yeoman?
Thank you, through you, Madam Chair. So The tree selection that we go through is informed by a number of factors. It's informed by an urban forestry review and assessment. It's also informed by park design as well in terms of a lot of the different priorities and needs that we're trying to work through with the park. Harris Park is a citywide park and it has a number of uses. We want to encourage that. We want to really bring more Londoners down to the park as well. We're also very mindful too that the core continues to intensify and we're going to need additional park opportunities for those residents as well too. In terms of the community planting suggestions, we're happy to receive those and consider those. We also need to look at species availability with our suppliers as well too. And unfortunately, some tree species are not planted in large numbers by suppliers, or the supply is diminishing as a result too of trees in general.
Any other questions, Councillor?
Yes, I actually have quite a few. The statement was made that some of the community concerns were not given serious consideration because the scope of the project had already been determined by the time you did the open house. Could you respond to that?
Madam Chair, it would be very rare for us to go out to an open house without some well-developed design on paper for which people can provide comment and feedback at that time. But there have been a number of discussions about the work in Harris Park over the course of several years. We're always happy to receive suggestions, but we do not act on all of those suggestions. And we understand that for community members, that might be frustrating that their concerns were not addressed.
Okay, there's also a statement that there are implications with respect to the Migratory Birds Convention Act to remove nest removal. And I'd like to know to what extent have these concerns been specifically addressed, because we don't want the city to be in violation of these broader laws.
Madam Chair, this is legislation that we are very familiar with. We work within the context of almost all of our projects, and certainly that's why the removals are done prior to nesting season. We will be in compliance with the requirements of legislation.
My next question deals with the using petroleum tar for pathways to access the river's edge. Is it absolutely necessary to engage in this level of sort of non-natural development?
Madam Chair, the pathway near the river's edge is intended to be hard surfaced using asphalt to ensure that we have a year-round wearing surface that is accessible to all pathway users. Use of permeable surfaces, crusher dust, gravel, wood mulch would preclude the use of that space from people with disabilities. It makes it inaccessible for people with bikes, and it's also problematic for people who might be using baby carriages and other sorts of devices to that extent. I don't have an alternative that would be environmentally friendly. I know there's the suggestion of using steel grates or plates. Those are extremely costly, have a high level of embedded carbon, but also create a very slippery and challenging surface for people with mobility challenges.
Okay. There's a statement in here that it's also intended to facilitate large transport trucks that can carry heavy equipment to the concerts and festivals.
Madam Chair, the pathway that is designed as part of the park project is meant to be a pathway for users of the park. We do design the TVP proper to at least be able to access for emergency maintenance and repair purposes for park assets. We are not designing a road to service Harris Park.
Councillor?
And finally, this is just, thank you for indulging my questions, because this is coming up a lot. And since this is not a development project that goes to council for approval, it's difficult for councilors to have this interaction with you. So I really appreciate this. Is there some additional meeting or review, or I'm not calling for a council vote or a public participation meeting because that's not in the bylaw, but is there something else we could do to sort of try to incorporate some of these and other community concerns into the final project a little more before we proceed finally?
Madam Chair, I'm not advising we have another public participation or a meeting to try to negotiate the content of the project. I don't believe there's broad agreement in the community. This is a citywide park, as Mr. Yeoman noted, as to what this project should look like when it's done. That said, if people wish to submit those ideas and they are ones we can incorporate at this phase of the project, we are happy to receive them.
Could I request that such submissions also be made available to this committee?
Madam Chair, certainly if anyone submits anything with a copy to Civic Works, then the clerk will distribute it to the members of the committee as requested by with the permission of the submitter.
If I could just go to Mr. Yeoman, too. Mr. Yeoman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just to add to that as well, I would like to let the committee know as well that we're always listening to the community feedback. We have, as Ms. Chair mentioned, we're incorporating the changes as best we can. We have actually, as a result of the public feedback received, we've tweaked the alignment of the Thames Valley Parkway to retain 4 additional trees that are in the park. So that's been a great benefit of the discussions, and I'm always happy to have those as we go along.
That's all from me.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Pribble.
Thank you. And I would like to thank Mrs. Valastro for coming today and also for the numerous questions she sent it through. I want to say that I want to mainly thank to our staff, and I think predominantly it was Mr. Titus that kept responding, and all his any concerns I had, and he answered, and there was a supportive rationale behind the steps we are taking. So I thank to our staff, and I do feel, as I said, the rationale was explained both to the person who sent the email and with the questions. And I would like if these could be also shared with other potentially, if there are any other concerned citizens about this, that if the answers could be shared with them, because the rationale is very clear. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Ferreira.
Thanks, Chair. I was happy to listen to this conversation. Just wanted to see where it went. But I do want to say thank you to Ms. Valastro, if she's still there, for the delegation, and thank you to staff. Great thank you to staff, and to Mr. Yeoman and Ms. Ramalou and Ms. Chambers. You've all been very helpful, and I do see that there was a good reception for community engagement, especially for that little tweak that we spoke about. So I do want to definitely send my thanks for that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee? I see none. I wonder if the committee will allow me just to make a comment from the chair. I want to thank Ms. Valastro for the delegation and for her many, many questions. I agree, it is a learning curve. It's for these projects, not just for Harris Park, but there's a number of other large projects in the city. And if anything, the questions being asked, lots of information being shared with staff responding. I am always amazed how important trees are to the community, and we get the emails, and I'm seeing a lot of heads being nodded from staff. I think we all understand the importance. It's almost an emotional feeling that you get when you know, especially the bigger trees are coming down. And if there's any opportunity or way that we can engage with the community ahead of projects or upfront as opposed to through that process, which is also important. But the more information is shared, the amount of trees that are going back, how we do the restoration, I think that has to be more of a fulsome process as we communicate with the community on the trees that are very precious in our city. So I think we're all in agreement that they do matter. How we can do a better job communicating, I think, is always a challenge for us. So thank you again to the delegation. I'm looking to committee, any comments? Receiving the delegation, looking for a motion. Councillor Ferreira to receive the delegation and looking for a seconder. Councillor Trousseau. And with that, we can proceed to vote.
I vote yes. I'm just having trouble with eScribe right now.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
So moving on, we did have a consent item pulled, 2.4, which is the 2024 Renew London Infrastructure Construction Program. I would like to get a motion to discuss the consent item on the floor. Councillor Frank, Councillor Ferreira. And I would like to also ask staff, there is a brief presentation on this, if the committee is willing to receive a quick presentation from staff. But for now, if we can, I guess I can go to staff then for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, no presentation, just some brief introductory remarks to set up the presentation or the report. So again, thank you for the opportunity to provide a brief introduction for this year's annual Renew London report. It outlines the city's successes and lessons learned from 2023 and previews the important work that's planned for 2024. So each year, the Renew London Infrastructure Program completes important underground work to replace and upgrade our aging infrastructure to make our city sustainable and ready for continued growth. On the surface, we undertake projects to enhance road safety, improve traffic flow, while encouraging more emissions-free active transportation. And in neighborhoods, we rebuild dozens of local streets, updating streetscapes and aging infrastructure for the next generation of residents and families. 2023 was one of the busiest construction seasons London has ever experienced, featuring 3 rapid transit projects, a new roundabout, and key transportation improvements. Last year's work represented continued improvements in the core, some of which will begin to wrap up this year. We're excited to soon welcome traffic back onto Victoria Bridge and under the Adelaide Street rail crossing, and reopen lanes of traffic on Wellington Street downtown. So we'll be keeping Londoners updated as we hit exciting milestones for each of those projects. Looking ahead, this year's 2024 Renew London Construction Program is set to tender just over $270 million in contracts to improve our city's infrastructure. That makes this the 3rd consecutive year of record-breaking construction value. Now, a contributing factor to this year's especially high construction value is that there are several large 2-year projects that will start in 2024 and continue into 2025. The 2024 projects will continue to focus on essential transportation investments above ground while addressing our aging underground infrastructure needs. We still have a bit more work to do in the core, as well as lots of new infrastructure that's being built in other parts of the city as well. So we're looking forward to delivering all of our 2024 construction projects, big and small, and our project teams will continue to coordinate with all of our partners to manage impacts and keep people informed during construction. Like in previous years, we've selected a list of top 10 projects, which we've packaged together in an interactive tool that you can find at london.ca/top10. And with that, I'll conclude my introduction and pass it back to the chair for any questions you have on the work presented in today's report.
Thank you, Ms. Stan. This was pulled by Councillor Ferreira. Questions, comments from committee members? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the comments and the overview of the item. The reason I pulled the item was specifically for a line that I read for the traffic diversion measures on page 18. And this discussion kind of took place a little bit on the other consent items between Councillor Pribble and Mr. McCrae on this with respect to the speed limit and just activations of the Flex Street itself. And it's basically speaking about, I'm speaking about the Dundas Place traffic diversion measures that took place in last year's construction season. And I do see, just from my own observation on the ground and from speaking with people who visit the area, that there is probably spin-off spin-off effects from those diversion measures. And I do want to see, as it was discussed already, that we'd like to see a more pedestrian-friendly environment on the Flex Street itself. So And again, you know, the Flex Street was built for events and for gathering spaces, and it supports business interactions and business themselves, as Mr. McCrae said earlier in this discussion. So I wanted to bring a motion that I did send to the clerk, and I was wondering if you could bring that motion up. And it's basically, I'll read the motion. It's that Civic Administration be directed to provide options for ongoing traffic diversion for Dundas Place between Wellington Street and Rideout Street, and report back to Civic Works with an operational plan in Q4 2024. So before anything, maybe we should go to staff and just see how staff can take that.
Madam Chair, I'm getting the nod from Mr. McCrae that that will work. I also have a note from Mr. Janchula. That will allow us to collect data from the patio season that goes well into the fall usually, analyze that data, and provide meaningful recommendations to council and committee.
Thank you for that. So the time frame, Q4 2024, is correct?
Yes, Madam Chair, I would suggest it's probably the later bit of Q4, but definitely Q4.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. I was hoping the sooner the better, but I do want to be able to work within the constraints of staff's time. So Q4 2024 at the end, that's fine, but I do want to just see if we can see what type of spin-off effects in using the Flex Street itself as more of a Flex Street. So it's built that way, so I figured we've already seen some positive interactions just as a byproduct from the diversion measures that we saw from construction. So maybe we should look into that just a little bit more. So that's what this motion is basically asking you to do. So I'm hoping for a seconder, and I'm hoping for this committee to approve it.
Okay, how about if we get a seconder first? Councillor Trousseau? Councillor Frank?
Thank you. And through the chair, I just had a couple questions. I don't understand actually. So maybe if I could ask the mover to explain, are you saying that you want more diversion traffic on Dundas Place or less, and you want it to be used more as like a pedestrian cycling Flex Street? Because I don't really know which way this is going.
Thank you.
Councillor?
So I drafted this motion from reading that one line on page 18. And it's basically looking for less vehicular traffic, as in cars, just to allow the Flex Street to be open more to pedestrian traffic. If that is bicycling traffic, I don't see why that would be an issue, but I would like staff to just report back and look at all the options. So that's what this motion is going for. It's just looking for staff to look into the Flex Street itself to open it up more for community gatherings. So that's what the intent of the motion is.
And it is a report back. Any other questions from committee? Councillor Pribble?
Thank you, and through the chair to the staff. I do, by the way, and I thought that last summer was absolutely fantastic, and we are on the right path in terms of the Dundas Place. The events that have taken place brought really many Londoners true joy, dancing, singing, lots of really fun, and it was unrecognizable from potentially some other days. But one thing in Dundas Place, and that was always kind of in the other parts of the world in such streets, you have, I don't know if the right word is the pillars, but you know, those yellow pillars, they go up, and then the staff can always put them up in 5 seconds and put them down. And I always see every time we do there, lots of staff, lots of bringing all the fences, etc. Is this something that we considered kind of, or is it feasible because in the infrastructure under, is it, I think it would be really make it everything much more smoother, much more faster, and much more flexible. Again, if we want to do certain things, even if it's the last minute things, have you ever considered it, or is there an opportunity to consider it now?
I think that will be addressed in the report back, but I'll go to staff.
Madam Chair, that's a good observation. So we have had some discussions about the type of barriers that should be used for both events or for traffic diversion if we're looking to restrict through traffic in a permanent way. We hadn't, when we were designing Dundas Place, deeply considered the types of bollards that come up from the ground. They're quite expensive, a little tricky to operate in the winter. But that said, as we report back, we can look at what the appropriate traffic control measures are. Certainly, we've got friends in the emergency planning area that we'd like to see a more robust barrier at some locations for big events.
Thank you. No more questions. Thank you.
Councillor Trousseau?
Am I, through the chair, am I correct in thinking that the fences are actually used when there is a licensed beverage serving area and that the fences would typically not be used just to stop traffic?
Madam Chair, we actually have not had Dundas Place fully open to traffic during the summer since its construction pre-COVID. So there is a combination of diversion using planters and various other types of barricades to close off the road. And that's done in collaboration with traffic engineering as well as our colleagues in event management who manage the Dundas Place event.
But the use of actual fences, which takes more time to put up, as he was suggesting?
Counselor, through the chair? Your question is around the fences?
About fences.
Specific.
Madam Chair, for the full closure of the road for an activation, we have temporary fences that are deployed. There are no permanent gates built into Dundas Place at this time. It is something we can explore through part of this motion, but when it was constructed, the intent was not for full closures all the time. So we have a temporary solution that has been working well since the plaza was completed in late 2019. But if we were to look at ongoing traffic diversions, we may want to look at a more permanent and easily deployed solution.
Okay, I see no further questions. We have a motion. You can proceed to vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on, I have not been made aware of any deferred matters, additional business. I see none. Moving on. Oh,
Madam Chair, just to confirm, did we just pass the motion made by Councillor Ferreira, or do we have the motion for the acceptance of the report as information, staff recommendation as well, for 2.4?
we do have the motion to receive as well. So we
Thank
can
you.
vote on that. It's in front of us.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on, I've not made aware of any deferred matters or additional business. And I am looking for adjournment. Councillor Ferreira, seconded by Councillor Trousseau. Can we do a hand vote? Thanks, everyone.